Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Thank you for coming. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting here today, the Bunurong and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and note that sovereignty was never ceded. I'm really looking forward to this chat. Thank you so much for coming. It'll be a nice, intimate chat, and we're going to be talking about all things queer, trans representation, and on short film. And it's going to be amazing. There's going to be a lot of time for questions, so as everyone's talking, make sure you're thinking those up, noting them down, lodging them in your brain. But just to kick off, could we all please introduce ourselves? Quickly, I'm James. I work with the festival. The pronouns are he, him.
Hi, so my name's Sam Carson. My pronouns are she, her. I am one half of the writer-director team that did Emile is missing. Felix is here, he's the other. He's number two.
I'm Jude Ella and he, him, and the two of us worked on Victor's film, To Freely Flourish. I did the cinematography and co-produced with Victor.
I'm Victor. I'm the writer-director and co-produced the film with Jude of To Freely Flourish. My pronouns are he, they. I realized my film credits didn't have an acknowledgement, so I just wanted to acknowledge that my film project was made on the lands of Gadigal, Camaragal, and Darkinjin peoples, and that the decolonisation efforts of First Nations activists was a particular inspiration to me. And so I'm born in Hong Kong that had another history of British colonisation. It was a real inspiration.
Well, kicking straight off, we're going to be having a bit of a chat, but I'd first love to pass to Sam to chat about Emile is Missing.
Sure. So Emile is Missing, it's a faux documentary film. It's about a trans couple. One of them disappears under mysterious circumstances, and then we discover that maybe she orchestrated her disappearance. We learn that she's being spied on through her webcam, that maybe the surveillance company that is watching her has something to do with it. I was really interested in how to tell a story that was grounded in trans politics but didn't rely on sort of the cliches of trans cinema that we were used to. Oftentimes with a trans film you kind of have to hit certain beats. You have a character who comes out, they medically transition, they face some sort of adversity, they go for surgery, all this sort of it makes for a very cliched, sort of one-dimensional style filmmaking. So how can we tell a story about trans experience with a bit more depth and substance and curiosity as well? So we kind of came to fiction with that. Felix had originally written a short film about someone who's on a live stream and they glitch out of existence. And I think we both were really interested in surveillance as this kind of cultural force and what it means to not be in control of your own image. And so I think by using that sort of fictional framework, we were able to go a little bit deeper into, a part of trans experience about not being in control of our narratives, while also being quite universal. We did some test screenings, and lo and behold, I was only a trans person in the room, but all these cis women are watching and they're going, I know exactly what that's like, to be watched in a way that I can't control, as being compared to things like revenge porn as well, the sense of what does it mean to not have control of your own image? So I think I'm really interested in a style of queer filmmaking where we can use fiction and genre to kind of tell stories that may be a little bit broader about our experiences. Yeah.
I'll start off and I'll probably bring Jude in as we go along. I just wanted to give some context because in a similar way, you're exploring quite political, we were talking about this before, political, social, heavy issues, but in a very intimate lens. I was trying to do a very similar thing. My starting point was the marriage equality debate, that turmoil, and it was that destruction, because I felt it was the most vulnerable people in our community that had to suffer in the process of gaining marriage equality. Safe schools, I was viciously attacked the years leading up, kind of dismantled the year after. Marriage equality, the attacks on trans people intensified so much through that time. It was like kind of the smallest minority within our group that they just went after because they felt the battle was losing in the mainstream, and diaspora communities as well was another community that they targeted. There was this narrative of they pushed of how this is infringing on our cultural identity, and they really used that, and that did kind of get ingrained into our diaspora communities. I felt afterwards we're still dealing with that. So it was that destruction and that of my communities of different ways that kind of was the starting point for the journey of making this film. And it wasn't actually until during the lockdowns when it was another depressive circumstance layered on top that I was searching for more like hopeful and optimistic, light-hearted viewing that I came across The Family Law and Schitt's Creek. Even though that's US and more mainstream, it was definitely the kind of that optimistic and hopeful lens. And I realized that that was actually quite radical to, not banal, but actually quite radical to have something that's just hopeful and optimistic. And I saw other things, other short films like Happy New Year, Miss Luna. I saw that after, read about it after I read the script, but that sort of hopeful diaspora storytelling was what I realized was what our community needed. Because like pain and tragedy and loss, it's not going to change how my community views queerness. We need stories that can like imagine what our future can be as a community. And yeah, I mentioned how the decolonization efforts was what I found really powerful from that thinking is that it's a connection, a stronger connection and understanding of your own culture and community and people is the most powerful way to drive change. Not to like dwell on the tension between mainstream and the community, because that just isolates us more, I think, and makes us react, makes the community react against queerness or things that they feel are from the outside. So I wanted a story where we only need to look to our own community and people as inspiration for how we can support and embrace our queer. And I guess kind of sending the feelers out for the project was when I really connected with different people in our community, like Jude, and I found that the Asian, especially Asian filmmaking or theatre making community understood the importance of the project, the story, and why it was important to have a positive story that could change hearts and lives. And I think we had a few moments during production where I'll let Jude talk to that a bit more, where I didn't realise the kind of the importance and power of it until like I saw the footage and saw it on screen, that it had a special power to see it, act it out, and like get catharsis from in the ways that we can't have in real life that creative story can offer. Maybe I'll pass it over to Jude at this point to kind of let him talk about his experience.
I might just talk a little bit about what Victor's mentioning here. So there's a scene in the film where it's the relationship between the mother and the son, really, and the catharsis is really that, I won't spoil the film, but that there's a different experience, I think, to a lot of young queer Asian people have with their parents. And so Victor's kind of presenting kind of an alternative narrative, what would happen if there were a more positive response to a young person coming out.
Doesn't come out. But when the family finds out or realizes.
I guess I'll pass along a couple of my own questions, and then I'm going to fire it out to anyone else if anyone else is sort of interested in asking anything about particular films or topics. But starting with Sam, you touched on that kind of note of surveillance, and I think that's something that's, for anyone who hasn't seen the film, Emile is Missing does such an interesting way of different kinds of viewing, and it's a way overused word in film criticism, but voyeurism. I'd love to hear about more about that and how the kind of like different lenses were used to try and like continue that kind of conversation of that kind of intensified I guess I don't know how to phrase it, like kind of non-naturalized viewing, this kind of, and also unknowing viewing on the part of Emile.
Yeah, so maybe I can give a bit of background for how it started. So it kind of was, for me, the film started as a bit of an academic premise. I was doing my honours at BCA. I was writing about trans film. I was writing about how it was that we had such narrow expectations of who and what a trans character in film would be, and sort of this reckoning with a canon that is largely transphobic. And so all of that came down to lenses, and kind of looking at the different, I use lens as a kind of like framework for how we see culture and ideology. So questioning why it was that these certain trans films made by cis filmmakers kept missing the mark, and why they were so essentialist as well, that we had to keep relying on these tropes in order to recognize that the character was trans, you know. To like, you get these scenes where they have to undress the character to show them as they really are in order to understand that this is a person who is trans. So Lenses was about that. It was we have all these different characters with different perspectives of who this person Emile is/was, and we wanted to set up a framework where each of those perspectives had their own stake at reality, and that for our protagonist Isabel, who's trying to sift through these different stories, she's coming into conflict with other narratives that have just as much material truth and weight. So we used something like 7 different kinds of cameras. We had surveillance, camcorder, we had cinema camera, webcam, screen recordings. I think we had some digital renderings as well with the glitch art. I think there's something dysphoric about that as well, that you get this character who's caught in between these worlds and the distress of, we meet with the archivist of EmileCam.com, and he's been spying on her for years, and he has this like backlog of videos, and he has this really clear idea of Emile, and it's completely different to Isabel's, but he's so sure of it, and we see these interviews that Isabel does, and we start to question if her version of reality is quote-unquote true, because they contrast so directly with each other. So I think that the distress of that was something that I was able to kind of go, okay, this is what it means to be reckoning with, your narrative is out of your control. You know, I, as a trans filmmaker, am inheriting a canon of transphobic film images, and those expectations that people bring to a trans film, something that I kind of came up against a lot in the academic space. And so, I wanted to kind of place that as a tension and foreground it, and also maybe not judge it so much as well, that we kind of understand that, that these are kind of their own unique and almost objective lenses with ideological backgrounds, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something, you bringing up the archivist to me is really interesting in that specific area, because again, for anyone who hasn't seen the film, the archivist in no way believes they have done anything wrong by cataloguing this person's life, and has a very objective view on that.
It's this entitlement. Like, that really came through. Like, I'm entitled to see everything into your life. For this narrative that what you want, what you gave consent to. Yeah, that came through so strong, and the use of that surveillance and stuff was just a really compelling, so compelling. Yeah.
And a kind of reverse entitlement that would never be okay for the opposite, for that cishet man. That would be in no way an expectation. I thought, is that something that was kind of coming on there with that character in terms of the pressure of, as a representation of public not in any way understanding? Because there's no guilt, there's no understanding that action was wrong.
Yeah, totally. I mean, he has lines like, we wouldn't do anything to her, we loved Emile.
Yeah.
Like,
And that makes it okay.
This is her doing. Like he's quite adamant that. I like that he keeps looking into the lens as well. Like he really believes in what he's doing, and also that exchange is maybe almost a positive one. I think maybe reckoning with like how a cis culture interacts with trans people. I think fetish is actually a big part of that. Like that there is this kind of dual violence and fetish that are happening at the same time. You see there'll be like a statistical spike in trans violence, and at the same time we shoot right up in Pornhub stats as well. Like these two are kind of hand in hand. So I think that this is something that these two characters are reckoning with a public world and what they think of them, and the nuance of that. Yeah,
you mentioned how you found that different audiences who aren't trans like really identified with certain experiences that you were conveying. And as like a gay Asian person in the gay community, that's something I personally identify as well. There's a lot of fetishization, but a lot of entitlement.
Yep.
From kind of general community to gay Asian men's bodies. There's that I personally identified with. Obviously it's not exactly the same way, but it really evoked that feeling.
I feel that. Similar complex, right?
Yeah.
And for Jude and Victor, I had one thing that I thought was really interesting that you just said, Sam, was that kind of idea about the multiple different lenses, but them all being objective in their own way. I think it's really interesting, obviously, the contrast between the two films, because To Freely Flourish has quite a traditional drama objective lens, but I think in a lot of ways it achieves a lot of similar ends in the way in which and I love that we're able to hand directly to the director here, the direction between the two main characters leaves a lot unsaid, but also says so much at the same time. What was the, in telling that story, and especially like you're talking coming off of the back of the plebiscite and all of the horrible things that came off of the back of forcing that conversation instead of just making it happen, what was the onus of choosing that relationship, the tightness between that mother and son relationship?
Yeah, so I talked about the challenge, mentioned the kind of the challenges of bringing up this topic in our community, especially after the misinformation of marriage equality. There's a lot of resistance to kind of looking, even acknowledging queer topics within our cultural space, and I knew that statistics, and I think you probably agree, statistics, people don't get an understanding, especially when the experience is so foreign to them. You can only understand someone's humanity through experience, I feel, not through rational or logical reasoning. And so I knew I wanted to make a film that was talking directly to Asian diaspora community, and it had to be a form that they find palatable. So obviously it's not edgy filmmaking or great filmmaking in that way, but that I felt is the only way you can reach an audience that is quite consistent. And I knew that, and the other audience I was speaking to is queer people that don't have so much at stake, with their families. They may feel uncomfortable with being visible, but I want to show them how being visible, in everyday, ordinary, everyday scenarios can have an impact on the community. And so it was definitely a drama where parents and other adults in the community can see, kind of identify with the pain of disconnecting with their child. Because I see it as a film of it's two needs. I think it's not just the one need. They can identify with that firstly, and that they can see kind of the moments that they don't necessarily see in their own child's life, and really see their pain of disconnection because their parents can't see their whole selves. So it's quite traditional kind of drama, but I felt that was the way to reach the community. And then seeing what happens when your seemingly innocuous visibility in your community, the tremendous impact it can have, in a family where they are need to be grappling with this issue. What happens in private, that you don't necessarily see, to see the impact of your visibility. So yeah, that was kind of the purpose.
Opening up, does anyone have any questions for either of the filmmakers? If not, I'm just going to keep going. Yeah, please.
I got heaps, but I'm going to keep it to two. One for each set of filmmakers. What was your name again? Sorry? Sam. So I actually just didn't get that it was a trans movie at all. But I'm very much not in, I don't know what's going on. I don't even know the difference between cis and trans. So that's. But I'm a good test subject because I'm going in blank, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of got some androgynous kind of vibes from the main character, but the hair was different. It was not quite, I liked that because I could focus on the story. And I think in the back of my mind, I realized that the character might have been trans. My question to you is, if you had your time again, do you think you could actually, and I appreciate what you're saying about the ones that just miss the mark, because it's all that bullshit about I'm trans and this is what I've got to go through. It's just it becomes a romantic comedy, the same tropes.
Yeah.
Can you twist it a bit more and actually really shove it in the audience's face a bit more? Do you know what I'm trying, shock them a bit more? Because for me, yours is very much in the background. Again, I like it, but did you ever think let's just accentuate this a little bit, or do you know what I'm trying to say? This is without me knowing how it's a trans film.
Yeah.
Really, does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I think the question of legibility is a big one for trans film, in the sense of it came up when I made the film. I had lecturers who were how do we know that the character is trans? Maybe we need a scene where she's doing her makeup at the start, or maybe she can be talking about how someone misgendered her. It feels cliche. But I understand what you're saying, because I think it is a more general concern for trans. It's how am I sure that people are reading me the way I am? But what I think is really cool is that we made a film about the violence of surveillance and how that works as a trans allegory, the way that The Matrix is a trans allegory. And so even if people don't recognize that the character is literally trans, I would like to think that they're reading something into the narrative about what it means to be seen and narrativized, looked at without your consent. I think the creepiness of the film is what I wanted to communicate. So I don't really mind being misgendered. I'm past that point now, because the people who watch the film who are trans will recognize the transness of that character, and I don't feel like I need to win over a cisgender audience. Yeah.
That makes sense. Just on that other point too there, because you mentioned that the guy was how do you know? That lecture or whatever, right? Saying we need. I think what I'm saying is that more can it be a reveal at the end that because that Hollywood one that came out about the rest, I didn't even watch it, right? That's your quintessential let's get awards or whatever.
Yeah.
But are there some trans films out there where you look at them and you're just wow, that's pretty in your face and it kind of works? Or is it not a thing? Is there nothing? Yeah. What are your inspirations and where are you going to go from here in terms of where you take that kind of identity, the cis trans kind of film identity? I'm curious because I don't see it that much. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel a need to be legible to cis people. If they don't get it, if they don't read it, then that's okay with me. I think that there's a handful of filmmakers I'm thinking about. Jane Shorengren, who did I Saw the TV Glow. There's Vera Drew, who did The People's Joker, which was a Batman parody film where she cast herself as a trans woman called Joker. In Australia, we have Alice Mann McKay. She's a horror director. She's made 5 films and she's 20 years old. Awesome. what I really like about these filmmakers is that they're not so didactic in how they signpost their trans storytelling. They're most commonly they're using horror as a genre to talk about the violence of existing in a world that doesn't understand you. And I think as like fictional storytellers, it's more about the substance of the narrative than metaphor or allegory. Yeah, so I don't feel like I need to signpost the transness in order for the narrative to function as a trans allegory.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah, I think like you listed out like those films that which may operate in a more cryptic. It's more engaging and people think about it longer after viewing the film. Like that's something that's like obvious. Like I do think like it does read cliche when you hit those points.
Yeah.
And I found your film really refreshing. Like it was really engaging because it wasn't that. And I would say that for my own film, yeah, sometimes when people read it, or even after they watched it, they needed to ask me, oh, what does that mean? And yeah, again, I was like, I don't feel like I need to explain it. Like, and also my film was for, you know, the Asian diaspora community. Like, I don't really care if people
and who would recognize it, right?
Yeah, I think
you
it's more
design for a
special.
community, they
It's
go,
more special when the community like spots it,
Yeah.
and everybody else is like, what?
Yeah.
And also like the other people, they are curious afterwards, and I think that makes your film a bit more memorable as well. Not that you're using it as a gimmick to make it memorable, but I think it does make it more.
I agree. And I want to add to that actually, yeah, because I think that there's a, the question of legibility is totally part of the film. Like it's like that this is a character who remains nebulous. And so I think that that's, you know, your question is kind of on that topic is how do we recognize that a person is a person? You know? Like,
is the ultimate point that you get like a trans or like queer actor to just play any type role and there's no question kind of thing, like it's irrelevant? Does that question make sense? Like we're obviously at this point where people are like, oh, you gotta be gay, play gay, like it's getting to that point or whatever. Where does it all fit? Like what's the end goal, do you all think, sort of thing? So that's a really big question.
That's such a big question. Yeah, I don't need this microphone.
It makes it sound official, it's cool.
Yeah, I just, you wanna, yeah.
Yeah, I could maybe have a crack at this. I'm actually a lecturer, and I lecture film making, and my students are kind of everything. They are he, him, they, them, she, her, and just from observing them, it's really like the same question. I feel my response, because I think about this a lot, is that it's just like a multicultural world. And this is the next evolution, and it's, you know, I identify as this or I identify as that. It's really up to the person's preference and what how they want to see out their life, experience their life. You know, I have my own identity that suits me, and I just tell people that gender is very personal. The journey of gender is very personal to each person, and that's probably the little piece of information that we don't really have as a society yet, because you know, where we've come from, it's, oh, you're this or you're that. Whereas really it's an internal journey. Just as much as it is for sexuality, as much as we can't say, oh, this is what you are, you know, this is what you should like. We can't say, oh, this is the way you should be. It's very personal, and watching my students going through my own version of that journey, just going, oh yeah, whatever they prefer, really, and that suits them. It's like the right clothes. So that's kind of how I feel about that question. That it's just a new form of multiculturalism.
Can I ask one more question while he's got the mic for them, and then I'm done? On the multiculturalism point, and like everyone having this individual journey with regards to their like sexuality, identity, stuff like that. One of the interesting things I thought about your film is that even though it was like way more overt than Emile is missing in terms of like the sexuality or whatever, the gender, it only really happened at the end. Like it wasn't, for me it was about the music for so long, and I was like, this is a quintessential story about like a Chinese Asian kid or whatever, from like Strathfield, from Sydney, who's like under pressure from, that is like a universal, like everyone knows that, that's hell, like, you know, even if you're Caucasian. So like, was there a discussion there being like, what's this movie about? Because for me, it also doesn't really feel like a queer film. Like, even the bit where he's on Facebook, I was like, oh yeah, that's like kind of subtle. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yes, yeah. And that is the type of thing I like to write. I have always like kind of asked, like when I was getting the scripts read and reviewed by other filmmakers, I do ask, is there too many things in there? Is how, like, especially if they're not Asian, I ask how clearly does this read to you? And someone that watched it, and I know, like, I didn't see them watch it, but they watched it themselves, and they asked, oh, was it a queer film? I know they didn't watch it carefully though.
I just wanted to go on record and I picked it up. Like,
yeah, I think
straight
it's
off
the
bat.
thing where, like, as well as your film, I just straight away. I think it's like
that's because that was our coming of age.
yeah, exactly. So I actually think it is, like you say, maybe a strength of it, and some people have found it a strength in that it's not hitting all the kind of the usual tropey points of the coming out of like
jerking off like in secret, like you see that sometimes. Just like I'm ashamed. Like it's not like that Doom trilogy, Gregoroki or whatever his name is. That's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah,
Do you know what I'm saying? That's cool too.
Yeah.
But like this, like there was none of like just the Facebook. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit of, is it a joyful moment? Is it like a yearning, or is it like a despair? I did want to roll all those things into that moment, and I think that is what makes a story feels real as well. It's because you're not just packaging something that feels ready to consume because it hits the marks. Yeah.
Just to add to that though, I want to say for me, Victor's film is so much more of an accurate experience, to at least my personal experience of what it is to be queer and Asian. It's way more subtle. It's, I mean, it isn't any of that really intense stuff you're just talking about. It's really, you know, my relationship to my mum. It's all very subtle and very deep and unspoken. Yeah. So to me, it was really obvious. You know, all the stuff that was happening in all the scenes. I was going, oh yeah, this is exactly how it was between. And I think a lot of Asian queer children would feel the very same way about their relationship to their parents. It's really loud. To me, it's super loud. In its quietness, it's super duper loud because it's really so much louder from how much heartache is in the air, really, which is the way you experience it as you're growing up, because you can't say, you can only feel, and you can only feel this tension. And the scene with Lee Long where he goes out and it's just him and nature. It's really, I just really resonate with that because I just think that's how it feels. You can't speak, really. That's the experience, and it's so much louder for me for that reason.
Another question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what were some films and filmmakers that really inspired you to make this, that you want your work to resonate with, that you want to attach to? Would they be you guys?
Oh, is it you first?
Oh, I'm done enough speaking. Yeah, so I mean, like I mentioned, I think there's this new cohort of trans filmmakers that I think in their styles are markedly different to the films made about trans people previously. They're using genre, fiction, metaphor, and I think that they get to make something that's more engaging, more universal. So yeah, Jane Schomburg, Alison McKay, Vera Drew. There's a Canadian filmmaker called Louise Ward, and she made sitting at like something like 8 hours now. It's called Castration Movie, and it's in parts 1, 2, and 3, and it's a camcorder film, and it's so punishing. But I love, she's so like unashamed in the fact that she's made this giant, like this epic of film. We also looked at like a lot of academic films. I think Surveillance was obviously the big one. We wanted to make sure that we were doing that in a way that didn't feel kind of schlocky. So All Light Everywhere by Theo Anthony is a great one. It's kind of, a lot of it's about like cop body cameras and the ethics of cameras more generally and surveillance. Peter Steele is an academic, and she's got a film called How Not to Be Seen. Does disappearances as well, and digitality, how we have our digital doubles and interact with the world, or interface with a kind of I'm not sure how you would call it, sort of like the cybernetic consciousness. yeah, I think those are our inspirations.
In terms of, I was just speaking to James before, that my main reference point is a Japanese director called Koreeda, and it's like the sense of pacing, sorry, and the character-driven narrative rather than plot-driven, and that sort of, and the breathing room you have in the pacing was my main reference point. I would say.
I have a really unconventional response to this,
Love it.
but I just have to go there because it's my experience. So, I mean, so I'm trans male. My reference in terms of just having someone in the industry, I understand the question was specifically about the films, but I'm going to respond in terms of my experience in the industry. So I only had Elliot Page really as a reference. And I came out to an industry where there was no one else that was trans before me. So really, my plight or my journey has been to create a space that never existed before. Obviously that's happening because now I'm sitting here and, you know, when Victor came in, which was 4 years after I had that intention, I really went, oh, this is happening. And now I lecture in a space where everyone's trans and queer in front of me. So to me, I don't have a reference is my unconventional response in that I've had to engender that, I've had to create that. It was just about courage. It's just about going somewhere where there's no one there in front of you. You can't say, oh, this is what I'd like for it to be, because there's nothing. It's just more an internal thing where you go, well, it's a lot of internal talk. It's a lot of, wait a minute, there's a lot of negativity coming toward me. There's a lot of blame. There's a lot of assumption it's responding to that and going, wait a minute, okay, my job is actually to create the safe place I never got before. And then people like my students can walk into that space and go, oh, I feel safe, you know, as if it always existed. But really, your job is to create the shelter that never existed. So I feel, you know, in this case, I'm a cinematographer and a co-producer, but you know, I'm here to help Victor with the structure to build that house, to convey a message that has never been conveyed before. You know, I feel safe under Victor's, you know, script leading. You know, the script made me cry every time I read it, and then when we shot it, and then I watched it back, because it was giving me a house I never got to live in, which was, you know, a response from parents that never happened, probably doesn't really, you know, that's what film's there for, hasn't really happened, you know, maybe there's very little of that kind of response in our culture. So yeah, that's my unconventional response, is that it's a feeling thing. It's starting from inside. It's starting for what you want the world to be, not that there's anything in the world there for you to reference. It's that it's in its absence that it becomes clearer, very, very clear what should be the case.
I think that reminds me of what Sam was talking to us before. We had this chat about how you see trans representation, but you have this feeling about you want to create like trans cinema as a whole new thing, and that sounds similar. It's like you've got this feeling it's not enough for just to be represented, but to create this whole kind of lineage, I guess.
It's true. Yeah. If I can add to that, I think through the research I did with the thesis, and then more so with the academic work I'm doing this year, discovering a canon that actually does exist of like trans filmmakers throughout history has been really exciting, and it turns out that some of these new styles, what we think of as new styles, like using the genre as allegory, are actually really consistent with trans filmmakers across cinema history. It's just that they've been relegated to the archives, and so getting to go to, in Melbourne we have Gay 24, it's like a monthly queer film night, and they screen a lot of archive films that maybe haven't even been seen in Australia, and the programs there are really incredible because they literally go through every program of every queer and trans festival around the world, going back decades and contact filmmakers, and so there's something about like uncovering an archive that's really exciting and realizing that you're actually not so siloed and isolated in your storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah, similar for me. Like, I think a lot of people that saw the film say, "Oh, I've never seen anything like this before that speaks to my experience in my community." But I did, like, I saw those like Family Law, I saw Happy New Year, Miss Luna, and there was another one, Her Voice, which is about like a Catholic schoolgirl who was like a school captain, and she has to wrestle with that perfect school captain image. And those, like I saw that as the things that came before me that I feel is what I'm continuing and wanting to be part of. But yeah, it's interesting, like a lot of people will come to it and don't realise there is all that other, and it's
waiting for you.
Yeah, it's waiting, yeah, and I think that what I would love is by the film to kind of show people there is all this other stuff, and it's, as much as we build narrative in our own film, you want to build a whole narrative around cinema, about the kind of, like you say, trans cinema, not just like the gaze of trans people, but cinema from trans people. And like for me, like the queer Asian cinema, or diaspora specifically, because we have a different experience in our diaspora communities compared to, let's say, in Taiwan and Hong Kong directors or Chinese directors, even though there's so many beautiful films, like that we have our own unique perspective that we want to really show the world and show our community. Like our voices have been expressing itself. Like we just need to go and see it.
Yeah, wonderful. And with that, we have hit a close time, but we will all be around, so please come up and say hi. And thank you so much for coming. Give everyone a big round of applause.